Happy Knitters, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome as well. So in today's tutorial, we're going to talk about this cute little pumpkin hat that I got off the Line brand website. It's a free pattern, and I will put a link to the pattern in the description box below. So what I love about this cute little pumpkin hat is it's very easy to make. It would be great if you've got babies that are going to be born around October. I think it's a cute little gift that you can kind of give and say welcome to the world. Another feature that I like about this hat is that you literally could change the color of this hat, and it could be an apple if you change out the orange for like a Granny Smith green color. You can also change it out for purple and it'll become a little grape hat, or a little berry hat. So there's a different versatility. There's lots of versatility to this particular hat, and I hope you enjoy it. So if you want to learn how to knit this pattern, stick around. Thanks. The pattern calls for Vanna Choice yarn, and I was able to find it at my local yarn store. However, not those specific colors that were called out in the pattern. So you may need to do some substitutions like I did. So for this pattern, you're going to need size 8 double pointed needles, scissors, tape measure, a tapestry needle, and a row counter. So I'm going to be knitting the 6 to 8 pound size on this particular pattern. So I'm going to cast on 48 stitches. So you cast on the number of stitches required for the size that you are going to knit. Just a reminder, throughout this entire tutorial, I will be knitting the smallest size from the pattern. So please try not to get confused when you're knitting a different size. I'm using the long tail cast on for this particular pattern. I have an earlier video if you need to remember how to do the long tail cast on. I will put a link in the description box below for you. So it's always a good idea to count your stitches after you've cast on to make sure that you have the correct number of stitches. So now we're going to divide our stitches amongst our 3 needles, and we will do that with an even number for each of the needles. So you'll take the number of stitches that you have cast on and you will divide by 3, and that's the number of stitches that you will put onto each needle. The way I do transferring the stitches is I put my needle in as if I'm going to purl, and I pull the stitches off that way. I find that to be the easiest way to transfer your stitches. So you will continue to do this for each needle. When you get to the last needle, of course, you won't need to transfer because those will just be still sitting on the needle. So really you need to transfer stitches to needles 1 and 2, and then you should have a complete even set of stitches on each needle. So there you have it. So we've got all the needles, all the stitches transferred to all of the needles. So as you can see, this is how we're going to form our circle to start knitting in the round. We want to ensure that our stitches are not going to be twisted when we begin knitting in the round. So just make sure that all of the bumps are lined up on the inside of the needles, because if your stitches become twisted, you will have to undo your entire project because there's no way to fix that particular issue. So to begin knitting in the round, you're going to need to get your fourth double pointed needle, and you are going to take that fourth double pointed needle and you are going to insert it into the first stitch of the needle that is in your left hand, and we're basically going to join that third needle that's kind of hanging out with the tail and the working yarn. We're going to join that together to make a closed circle. So what I like to do is, for that very first stitch only, I like to take the tail and the working yarn and I like to wrap it around the first needle, give it a good snug, and knit my first stitch from those two, the tail and the working yarn. And after that, that is when I drop the tail and just start working with the working yarn. And it kind of just makes it a stronger and tighter closure for where you've joined them in the round. So the first row, we're just going to do knit 1, purl 1 for the entire first row, actually for the first 2 inches of this particular pattern. I'm going to go ahead and speed up the video so we can get to the end of the first row. So now we're coming to the last needle. We're on the last needle of the first row, and we're just going to finish that off with knit 1, purl 1s. Yay, now we're done with the first row. So we want to go ahead and kind of position our needles to start with the second row. So as a reminder, remember when we first started on the first needle, we had knit the tail and the working yarn together. So be sure to treat those as one stitch and just continue during your knit and purl. You can always tell when you're at the beginning of a round is when you come to the needle that has the tail yarn hanging down. So just go ahead and continue your knit and purls for the next 2 inches, and I'll meet you back here. Okay, so now let's see if we have made our 2 inches. So just take your tape measure and measure from the bottom of the needle to the end of your work to see if you've reached your 2 inches. Looks like we've done that. So now we're going to start with knitting in the round, just knitting completely for 5 inches. That will create our stocking net stitch for our hat. So now let's measure again to make sure that our measurements are correct. So we should be at 5 inches from top to bottom, and we are. So now we can start the decreasing instructions based on the pattern that you are knitting. Okay guys, I'm going to show you how easy it is to make a mistake. So check out what I did on this second stitch. So I entered the stitch, but instead of pulling the thread between the needles, I wrapped it on the outside of the needle. So I actually ended up creating an extra stitch on that last needle, which I corrected off camera. But just to let you know that even though you've been knitting for a long time, you definitely can still make mistakes. And I think for me, trying to record and knit at the same time, I'm still new at it, so yes, I don't think I was paying attention. So I just want to let you know, even though I've been knitting for a while, you can still make mistakes. So let's go ahead and fast forward to the end of this row and start with the next row of straight knitting. So now we've come to the next row, which, like I said, is going to be straight knitting continuously all the way around for this particular row. And I'll meet you at the end to start the second row of decreases. So now we're going to start the next row of decreases. Now remember, I'm knitting the smallest pattern, so please follow the directions based on the size that you are knitting. So now we're coming to the end of our second decrease row. So now our next row is going to be a straight round of knitting. And so usually on a hat pattern, you would knit one row with straight knitting and then you would do decreases. That way it'll be a gradual decrease and you don't have to worry about your hat being pointed. So we finish up our last row of even knitting, and so this is our last decrease round based on the size pattern that I'm knitting. So you'll do one more even row of knitting. I decided to do that off camera so that this video wouldn't be too long, but don't forget to knit that one last row. So now we're ready to begin our I-cord. So from the directions, we are going to change colors to the brown, and we're going to knit two together completely around with the brown yarn. This part of the pattern is the same no matter what size you've picked to knit. So now we're back to the beginning of the round. So now we're just going to knit a complete even round. So now I've combined all of my stitches down to one needle, and we're just going to work back and forth as if we were knitting straight. Sorry guys, my camera died, so I don't want to get you guys off track. So the knit twos were done off camera. So now let's start our I cord. And an I cord is basically going to give us that stem on the pumpkin hat. So we've got to remember that when we are doing an I cord, we are not going to turn our work. We're going to work back and forth. We're going to work back and forth on the needle without turning our work. Actually, we're going to end up sliding the needles down to one side, as you'll see. So notice how I didn't turn the work. I just pushed our stitches down to the end of the needle, and we're going to continue to knit. I think I actually went one more row that I needed to, but that's fine. It's just the stem, right? So now it's time for us to bind off the I cord. So it's just a regular bind off, and I have a video on that as well if you need to refer to how to do the bind off. So be sure and weave in the yarn where you did the color change. I usually do that through the inside of the hat so it's not seen. Now we can go ahead and complete the leaves of the hat. This is a quick, simple 7-row stitch, and you're going to make 2 of these. So I'm just going to show you how to make one of the leaves, and of course you would just need to repeat for the second leaf. So now we've completed one leaf, so weave in the ends and make a second one and attach them to the hat. So now we're done. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this tutorial.